Outlaws of Thunder Junction is here, and it brings with it a host of both powerful new cards and much needed reprints. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 10 most expensive cards from the set as a gauge of the most anticipated new cards and the best reprints. However, we will be specifically limiting this list to cards from the main set of Thunder Junction, that being the cards with OTJ as their set code, and we're only talking about the base versions of each, so no special foils, no alternate frames, or anything like that. Alright, let's jump into this, starting with number 10, that being Double Down. Double Down is a 4-cost blue enchantment that says, whenever you cast an outlaw spell, copy that spell. This essentially allows you to just get 2 of all of your assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks, so if your deck cares about any of those creature types or just has a lot of one of those creature types, this is a really good card in those decks. Also, outlaws are obviously a mechanic of Thunder Junction, so if you're building a deck around any of the new cards there, you might just naturally have a lot of those creature types in your deck and may want to consider running this card. And with Ixalan last year and Assassin's Creed this year, these are going to be some popular creature types. Because of that, the card is going for $8.99, and this is one that I could really see spiking. Again, if we get a bunch of really powerful assassins or rogues or warlocks in a set, this just becomes better and better. Necroduality does almost the exact same effect, but just for zombies, and it's currently going for about $11, so I expect this will be somewhere in that range too. Next up, number 9 is Railway Brawler. This is a 5-cost green 5/5 with reach and trample, and it says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put X +1/+1 counters on it where X is its power. Then you can plot it for 3 and a green. This card is really powerful, essentially saying that all creatures you play after it are going to have double their base power and toughness, plus with its plot ability, you can plot it on turn 4, play it on turn 5, and then immediately play another big threat since you're not paying any mana for it on that turn. And this thing is just a 5-cost 5/5 with reach and trample, which is already decently statted, and you add on that extra ability and the ability to plot it, and it becomes a very good card in your typical mono green stompy deck. And because of that, it's currently going for $9.99. This just seems like an all-around really good card. Just a quick note before we move on to number 8, and this list does use pre-order pricing. It's intended more as a list of here are the 10 most anticipated cards, and not these are the prices you should be paying for these cards. Typically, this list will stay roughly in the same order, but cards will fluctuate up and down in price. Next up, number 8 is Bristly Bill Spine Sower. This is a 2-cost green 2/2 legendary creature plant druid that makes it so whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and then you can pay 5 mana to double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Landfall and +1/+1 counters are both very popular archetypes, and this fits really well into both. If you're in a landfall deck, you're going to get a lot of counters, and you can make this or something else very big, and then late game you have that mana sink with all the extra mana you typically get in a landfall deck in order to win the game, and if you're in a counters deck, you're just naturally going to get a bunch of counters, and then that double the number of counters ability can just win you the game off of 1 or 2 activations. For just 2 mana, this is kind of insane, and it can be your commander, meaning that this is going to be a fairly popular card. Given all of that, it's currently going for $10.99. Next up, number 7 is Oko the Ringleader. This is a 4-cost green and blue planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty, and then can +1 to draw 2 cards, and then if you've committed a crime, you discard 1 card, otherwise you discard 2. It can -1 to make you a 3/3 elk, and then it can -5 to make a copy of all your other non-land permanents. And then it has a passive where at the beginning of combat on your turn, Oko becomes a copy of up to 1 target creature you control until end of turn, except it has hexproof. This is a pretty versatile planeswalker. It +1s to draw you some cards and put some stuff into your graveyard, it can create a blocker for itself, and it's pretty easy to get up to the ultimate, and if you do, it will often just make you win the game, assuming you have a couple non-land permanents on board. On paper, this planeswalker is really good, but I can't really picture where it's gonna see play. It definitely feels like it wants to see play in Commander, but typically planeswalkers aren't that good in Commander because you have 3 opponents attacking them. Despite all that, it's still a really fun card, and because of that, it's currently going for about $12.99, and I'm excited to see this thing on the battlefield. Next up, number 6 is Gisa the Hellraiser. This is a 5-cost black 4/4 legendary creature human warlock with ward 2 and pay 2 life, and then it gives skeletons and zombies you control +1/+1 in menace, and then whenever you commit a crime for the first time each turn, you create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. This card seems really crazy to me. Even if it only made 1 token whenever you committed a crime, it would still be a pretty good card, but this creates 2, and each of them gets the boost from the Anthem effect, essentially giving you 6 power and toughness with menace every time you commit your first crime for the turn. All you need to do is figure out how to do it on your opponent's turn, and you can add 24 power to the board every turn cycle. And it can also be a commander, which is going to increase its price a little bit. Because of all of this, it's currently going for $12.99, and it seems like a really awesome card. Next up, number 5 is Final Showdown. This is a 1-cost but not really white instant with spree, meaning you can choose any number of the modes, and for each one you choose, you add that mana cost. You can add a mana and make all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. You can also add a mana to choose a creature you control, and it gains indestructible until end of turn, and then you can add 5 mana to destroy all creatures. The versatility of the spree mechanic is kind of crazy, and this card really shows it off the best. So for 2 mana, you can make all creatures lose all abilities until until end of turn, which may save you from trample damage or stop a combo, and that can be useful all on its own. For 2 mana, you can also just give a creature you control indestructible to protect it from a removal spell or make combat a little bit better for you. For 3 mana, you can do a mix of both of those things. For 6 mana, you can instant speed destroy all creatures. For 7 mana, you can instant speed destroy all creatures and save one of your own creatures. And for 8 mana, you can get rid of all abilities, stopping things like indestructible and death triggers, and destroy all creatures at instant speed, and then immediately untap with your single creature that had indestructible, and really put yourself ahead of all of your opponents. The point is, this card can be really good at any point in the game, and because of that, it's currently going for about $14.99. This might be one of my favorite board wipes, as it doesn't just clear the board, it allows you to actually win the game. Next up, number 4 is Tinybones the Pickpocket. This is a 1-cost black legendary creature skeleton rogue 1/1 with death touch, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can cast target non-land permanent card from that player's graveyard, and mana of any type can be spent to cast it. This just does a lot for 1 mana, and it kind of reminds me of Ragavan, although I don't think it's nearly as powerful. You know, for 1 mana, you're getting a 1/1 with death touch, meaning when you attack, your opponents really don't want to block, but they really do because they don't want that on combat damage trigger. And then if they are attacking you, you can leave this as a blocker and it'll always punch above its weight. While I think this is a good creature, I think the combat damage trigger is a little overrated. Early on, when you're going to be able to easily hit your opponent, there's likely to be nothing you can cast out of their graveyard, and late into the game, it's going to be hard to connect with your opponent, even with that death touch. It is still a lot of value for 1 mana, so it wouldn't shock me if it saw play, but I do think this isn't as good as a lot of people are making it out to be. Yes, it could end up in a mono black deck or a red black deck somewhere, as those are really popular right now, but it's currently going for $16.99, and unless it makes it into one of those decks, I expect it to drop quite quickly. Next up, number 3 is Jace Reawakened. This is a 2-cost blue planeswalker that enters with 3 loyalty, but you can't cast it during your first, second, or third turns of the game. It can +1 to draw a card and then discard a card. It can also +1 to exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand, and it becomes plotted. And then its ultimate is a -6 that says, until end of turn, whenever you cast a spell, copy it, you may choose new targets for the copy. This is a 2-drop planeswalker, which we've really only had 2 of in the past, and one is incredibly broken, and the other one is completely unplayable. The ability we care about here is that middle +1 ability, which allows us to plot a card from our hand. If we play this for 2 mana and then plot something that costs 3, we are essentially mana cheating on a later turn, and then it ticks up to 4 loyalty and is likely to stick around until our next turn. I think an interesting application of this is suspending cards that don't have a mana cost. Like, all of the things that can be suspended, like Ancestral Visions, can be plotted with Jace, and then on the next turn you can cast them for free, essentially allowing us to cast the spell without waiting for it to suspend. Obviously, if we don't have anything we want to plot, we can always +1 to loot, filling our graveyard and kind of cycling to one of those cards that we might want to use the middle ability on. This feels like an incredibly versatile card that a bunch of decks are going to want, and it's currently going for $17.99 because of it. Next up, number 2 is Terror of the Peaks. This is a 5-cost red 5/4 with flying that costs an additional 3 life to target with spells, and then whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. This is a reprint from Core Set 2021, so we're not going to talk too much about the potential of this card because we already know it's very good. Getting some extra value off of each creature you're playing by either hitting your opponent in the face or killing one of the creatures is incredibly good and will often just win you the game. Plus, it's difficult to target. This card had crept all the way up to about $50 before the reprint was announced, and now you can pick up a copy for about $19.99. It wouldn't shock me if this price falls more, but if this becomes a part of standard, I could see it shooting back up in price again. Alright, number 1, the most expensive card from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, it is Goldvein Hydra. This is an X and a green for a 0/0 with Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. But then when it dies, you create a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. This is one of, if not the best Hydra in the game for a bunch of reasons. First off, it dynamically scales as it goes in the game like every other Hydra, but it has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. So it can enter as a large creature that can both attack and block at the same time, it can trample through small things, and it can attack the turn it comes out, so your opponents probably aren't ready for it. But one of the large issue with a lot of Hydras is that you're putting all of your eggs in one basket, and if your Hydra happens to die, you lose a lot of value and you kind of wasted a whole turn. But here, if this thing dies, you get all of your mana back, and you might actually be happy because now the next turn you're going to untap with basically double the mana. This card is really insane, and it's currently going for $19.99 because of it. I could really see this going into a mono green stompy deck and really dominating a format or two. So those are the top 10 most expensive cards from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but it's not the end. We still have the breaking news bonus sheet and the big score bonus sheet, which I'll be doing separate videos to cover. Hit that subscribe button to be notified when I post them, or if they're already live, you can click them here to check those out. And if you want to pick up any of these cards for yourself, preferably after release, you can check out my TCG player link in the description down below. It really helps out the channel a ton, and I would appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.